Okay, I want you to imagine something. Imagine waking up and realizing the map of the world, the one you thought you knew, the one where, suit and superpowers hold all the cards, has fundamentally changed.
Overnight.
Exactly. Not a gradual drift over 10 years, but a snap. And that snap is today, January 18th, 2026.
It sounds dramatic when you put it like that, doesn't it? But looking at the stack of reports crossing the desk today, dramatic might actually be an understatement. We are looking at what analysts are calling a seismic transformation.
And for once, that phrase isn't just hyperbole.
Not at all.
So today we're doing a deep dive into this really complex report from the geopolitical analysis desk. And honestly, it reads like the climax of a techno thriller, except these are real coordinates, real supply chains, and, well, real alliances.
Yep.
The headline is The Retreat of U.S. Influence and the Simultaneous Rise of a China-Iran Axis.
And our mission here is really to connect the dots. Because you usually see these things in isolation, right? You'll see a ticker tape about a base closing in Iraq. Then a week later, a niche article about a factory delay in Texas.
But this report argues they're all part of a single, coordinated shift.
They are.
Right. So to keep us from getting totally overwhelmed, we've broken this deep dive down into 3 pillars. First, we're looking at the tactical map specifically, some major news coming out of Iraq and Syria about U.S. bases.
Okay.
Second, we're going to talk about the material war. And this is where it gets really scary for the defense industry. It involves fighter jets and something called rare earth elements.
And finally, we have to talk about the political escalation. There's a new defensive pact on the table. It involves the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SPO, and it completely changes the calculus for everyone involved.
So yeah, buckle up. We're looking at a potential tipping point in history. Let's start on the ground, the tactical map. What just happened in Iraq?
The breaking news centers on the Ain al-Assad Air Base. It's in the Anbar province of Iraq. Now, for the last decade or so, if you were following U.S. operations in the Middle East, you knew Ain al-Assad.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just a parking lot for planes.
No, it was the nerve center.
The hub, the eyes and ears.
Exactly. You had these massive runways, capable of handling heavy transport. You had housing for thousands of personnel. And it was geographically positioned to look west toward Syria and east toward Iran. It was the anchor.
And as of last night, that anchor has been pulled up, or, well, seized.
Correct. The report confirms that the base has been effectively seized by the Popular Mobilization Forces, the PMF.
Okay, let's unpack who the PMF is, because I think there's a tendency to hear militia and think of, a small group of insurgents in pickup trucks.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're dealing with here, is it?
Far from it. Militia is a massive misnomer. The PMF is a state-sanctioned paramilitary force. We're talking about 238,000 troops. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the entire active-duty military of the United Kingdom or Germany.
So nearly 250,000 troops. That's a standing army.
It is an army, and they're often called the Hezbollah of Iraq. They're well-trained, they're well-equipped with tanks, artillery, and crucially, they operate with significant backing and training from Iran.
And now they've taken the U.S.'s primary logistical hub in the region. But we need to get to the so what here. Why does it matter that they hold this specific piece of real estate?
Well, it's not just about the buildings. It's about the airspace. This base was a strategic shield. And by losing it, the U.S. isn't just losing a place to sleep. They're losing control of the sky.
Okay.
The report mentions Iran is expected to move in immediately with advanced radar and air defense systems.
That feels like the critical piece. If you put high-end radar in Anbar province, what does that do to the map?
It effectively places all of Iraqi airspace under Iranian surveillance and influence. Think about the flight corridors. For years, these were the highways for Western and Israeli surveillance drones, maybe potential strike packages heading toward Iran.
And now that highway is just closed.
It's a denied area now. It creates a buffer zone, a shield, that pushes Western influence hundreds of miles back. You can't fly a drone through there without it being tracked, probably jammed, or just shot down.
And this isn't happening in a vacuum. You said we have to look at what happened in Syria at the same time.
Exactly. The report calls it a coordinated retreat. So while Ain al-Assad is falling in Iraq, across the border we're seeing joint operations.
By who?
The Syrian army and Turkish-backed militias. Now, that's an interesting alliance of convenience in itself, but the headline is they've recaptured the Al-Tabaka military airport.
Al-Tabaka, that's near Raqqa. Right.
Correct. And they didn't just stop at the airport. They also secured several key oil fields that were previously held by U.S.-supported Kurdish forces.
So this feels like a classic pincer movement. You lose the airbase in Iraq, and then you lose the logistical route and the energy resources in Syria.
It creates what the analysts called a logistical impossibility. Without that airport, without the fuel resources nearby, the Pentagon's ability to sustain a presence in that corridor is just, well, severely compromised.
You can't run an operation if you can't fuel it and you can't fly over it.
Pretty much.
So geographically, the U.S. footprint is shrinking. The map is literally changing color. But here's where it gets really interesting, or I guess terrifying, depending on your perspective. While the U.S. is losing ground, they are also losing the ability to build the weapons they need to take it back.
Yes.
Let's move to Section 2, the material war.
This is a fascinating, if grim, part of the report. It moves us from territory to technology, and specifically to the F-35 Lightning II.
The crown jewel of Western air power, the quarterback of the sky.
Yeah.
But the production numbers in this report are just shocking.
They are stark. The production target for the F-35 was supposed to be 190 units per year. That's to satisfy the U.S. and all its allies.
Which is a healthy number for a global fleet.
It is, but the actual production for 2026, it's projected to be just 40.
From 190 down to 40, I mean, that is a collapse. That's almost an 80% drop. What is going on? Did the assembly lines just break?
The assembly lines are fine, they just can't get the ingredients. The bottleneck is rare earth elements.
We hear about rare earths all the time, usually with electric cars or smartphones. But I guess a stealth fighter is just a really fast, really expensive smartphone.
In a way, yes. An F-35 is a flying supercomputer wrapped in advanced stealth materials. It needs over 400 kilograms. That's nearly 900 pounds of rare earth materials per plane.
900 pounds.
Yeah. We're talking yttrium for the engine coatings to handle the heat, neodymium for the magnets and the actuators, terbium for the avionics. It's everywhere.
And let me guess who has the monopoly on those elements.
China. They control 85% of the global supply. But more importantly, they control nearly 90% of the processing capacity. You can mine the stuff elsewhere, but turning the rock into usable metal is a dirty, complex process that, well, China dominates.
And the analysis says Beijing has implemented strict export restrictions.
They've effectively turned off the tap.
But wait, haven't we been talking about decoupling and supply chain resilience for like 5 years now? Why is this still a problem?
Because you can't defeat geology and physics with a policy paper. It takes about 10 years to bring a new rare earth mine from discovery to full production. While the West was talking about resilience, China was consolidating its hold. And now, the trap is snapped shut.
So the U.S. assembly lines are paralyzed. Meanwhile, what's China doing? Are they suffering from the same shortage?
Hardly. They're sitting on the source. China's accelerating production. They were cranking out their own fifth-generation fighters, the J-20 and the new J-35.
The report mentioned a goal of fielding 1,300 jets by 2030.
That is a massive fleet. That's power projection on a global scale. And the contrast is what's driving this huge market shift. I mean, imagine you're a U.S. ally in the Middle East, say the UAE or Saudi Arabia. You put in an order for F-35s years ago.
Right.
Now, because of these shortages, the U.S. is telling you, sorry, delivery is delayed until the mid-2030s.
You can't wait 10 years for security. Not in that neighborhood.
Exactly. Security is a right-now problem.
Right.
So what do? You look for who has inventory. And right now, countries are looking at Chinese hardware. Or even Pakistani hardware, like the JF-17 Thunder, which is readily available.
It's that idea that availability just beats loyalty.
That's a perfect way to put it. In the global arms market, if you can't deliver, you lose the contract. When you lose the contract, you often lose the political influence that comes with it.
It's like the Apple ecosystem effect.
Yes. Once a country buys Chinese jets, they need Chinese training, Chinese radar integration, Chinese maintenance. It locks them into that sphere of influence for decades.
So, okay, we have the loss of physical bases. We have a paralyzed manufacturing base for high-end tech. Now, let's layer on the third pillar, the politics. Because all this is happening against a backdrop of some serious escalation.
This is the flashpoint mentioned in the report. Tensions between Washington and Tehran have always been high, but, they've usually played out through proxies or sanctions.
But the report says a red line has been crossed.
Yes. The report indicates that the U.S. administration, maybe feeling the pressure of these other losses, has authorized specialized action, targeting Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Targeting the supreme leader directly, that is huge. I mean, we saw the strike on General Soleimani years ago, and that was a massive deal. But this is the head of state.
It's an existential threat to the regime. For decades, targeting the head of state, particularly a religious and political figure like Khamenei, was just considered too dangerous. It was seen as a move that would guarantee total chaos.
But the authorization is there, and the reaction has been swift. This is where the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, comes into play.
Right. So the SKO is led primarily by China and Russia. Historically, it's been a security and economic bloc, often called the counterweight to NATO. In response to this specific threat against the Iranian leadership, they have signaled a new defensive posture.
They've basically said, don't you dare.
Stronger than that. They've signaled that direct military aggression against Iran will be met with the full military and logistical support of the bloc.
Full logistical support. That's a polite way of saying proxy war, isn't it?
It essentially means that if the U.S. makes a move on Iran, they aren't just dealing with Iran anymore. They're dealing with the industrial capacity and intelligence networks of China and Russia. It completely changes the risk calculation.
It creates a deterrent, a do-not-touch sign backed by nuclear powers.
Exactly.
But I noticed a really interesting nuance in the report about the SCO members. It's not a monolith, is it? It's not a single brain like NATO tries to be.
That is a critical distinction. The report notes that India and Pakistan have remained notably neutral on this issue. India specifically is walking a tightrope. They rely on Russian energy, but they view China as a primary rival.
So they are not signing up to fight a war against the U.S. just to save the Iranian regime.
No. So while China and Russia are solidifying this anti-interventionist pact, other members are stepping back. It shows that while the bloc is powerful, it has its own internal fractures.
It does. But for this specific standoff, it doesn't really matter.
Well, for protecting Iran from a U.S. strike, the core of China, Russia, and Iran is solid. And that core is powerful enough to freeze the U.S. out.
So let's bring this all together. We promised we'd connect the dots. We have the tactical map, the material war, and the political alliance. What picture emerges when you overlay them?
It's a chain reaction. That's the term the analysts used, and I think it's accurate.
Yeah.
We have the loss of forward operating bases, which, blinds you tactically. You literally can't see what's coming.
Then you have the inability to produce your top-tier aircraft, which hampers you materially. You can't build the tools to force your way back in.
And finally, you have a rival superpower alliance drawing a red line, which constrains you politically. You can't escalate without risking a much, much bigger war.
It feels like the definition of being boxed in.
It creates a fundamental weakening of the U.S. influence model. For the last 30 years, we've lived in a unipolar world, right? The U.S. was the sun, and everyone else just sort of orbited around it.
And now?
Now we are firmly in a multipolar reality. The East, specifically this China-Iran axis, now dominates two critical areas. They have the physical territory in the Middle East, thanks to these base seizures, and they are dominating the future war, the high-tech arms race, thanks to the rare earth monopoly.
It's almost like they flipped the script. The U.S. used to be the one with bases everywhere and the endless supply of high-tech weapons.
And now China is positioning itself as the primary military and economic alternative. And that's the real shift. It's not just that the U.S. is retreating, it's that there is someone else ready to step right in.
This isn't a vacuum.
Not at all. When Middle Eastern countries see the U.S. leaving bases and failing to deliver jets, and then they see China building alliances and delivering hardware, the choice becomes pragmatic. They pivot east. Not out of ideology, but out of necessity.
It's a sobering realization. We talked about January 18th, 2026 being a tipping point. And it really feels like the day the lever finally flipped.
It represents the solidification of an Eastern axis. The coordination is what strikes me the most. The base seizures, the export restrictions, the diplomatic pact, these are not random events happening in isolation. They're mutually reinforcing.
So we are left with a new map. A map where the shield over the Middle East is locked in place, controlled by Iran and backed by China. A map where Western supply chains for defense are broken.
Which leads us to a very difficult question for the future.
Right. And I want to leave our listeners with this thought to mull over. We've spent decades debating the politics of intervention. Should the West intervene in the Middle East? Is it moral? Is it expensive? But looking at this report, the question might have changed entirely.
The question is no longer about political will. It's about capability.
Exactly. If the bases are gone and the planes can't be built and your opponent is backed by a superpower alliance, is the era of Western interventionism officially over? Not because we chose to end it, but because it is now logistically impossible.
That is the question that will define the next decade. And frankly, looking at the data today, the answer seems to be leaning toward yes.
A heavy thought to end on, but that's why we do these deep dives. To look at the reality, not just the rhetoric. Thanks for walking us through this.
Always a pleasure.